It is rare that a man so far exceeds his peers in accomplishment, in excellence of spirit, and in obedience to his God, that his life becomes an example to his generation, and to those that come after him. Such a man is Michael Stafford Baines Reid, a man whose life has become a priceless tapestry, woven by an invisible hand with incalculable divine care. The extraordinary threads of that tapestry can be traced back, not only through more than 4 decades of ministry, but to generations before him, and eventually, right back to the heart of a God of boundless love. Michael was born into a world at war in the early hours of Saturday, the 15th of May, 1943. He was born in Beckenham, Kent, to John and Anne Reid. His father had, until approximately 1942, been an RAF Spitfire pilot, and thereafter, Station Warrant Officer at 1st Fighter Command, Biggin Hill. The war would play an important part in Michael's young life and would leave a permanent imprint upon him. To place his birth in historical context, it is interesting to note that just 3.5 weeks earlier, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising had begun. Just a week earlier, the war in North Africa had been won, with 110,000 Axis troops surrendering to the Allies. The day after he was born, the Allies' bouncing bombs breached the Ruhr dams, and by the age of 2 weeks, it would be clear that the Germans were losing the Battle of the Atlantic. Later that year, Rachmaninoff would die, and Casablanca would win Best Picture in the Academy Awards. George Harrison, the youngest of the Beatles, would be born in Liverpool, a city that was to play an important part in Michael's life. A 9-year-old Elvis was water-baptized that year. Jacques Cousteau, the famous oceanographer, invented the aqualung, and As Time Goes By and Moonlight Becomes You were released onto the pop music market. A 25-year-old Oral Roberts was pastoring a small church in Shawnee, Oklahoma. A 19-year-old T.L. Osborne was about to take on his first pastorate over 6,000 miles away in a small church in Portland, Oregon. 3,500 miles away, a 4.5-year-old Benson Idahoser was playing in the hot Nigerian sun. An Austrian duke in his 20s by the name of Alf Schultes was in solitary confinement for refusing to join the Nazi Party. Judson Cornwall, just 19 years old, had just finished Bible school and got married. A 3.5-year-old Nicky Cruz was growing up on the witchcraft-infested island of Puerto Rico. This was the year into which Michael Reid was born, a hefty 10 pounds 12 ounces, right in the middle of an air raid. Michael was a happy and responsive baby with one brother, John, just 13 months his senior. John's main aim in life at this age was to brush Michael's hair. However, it was not long before the finger of war would point in Michael's direction. He eluded death at the hands of the Luftwaffe when just a few months old. His mother snatched him from his pram at the back of the house at Biggin Hill Aerodrome just moments before it was targeted by cannon fire from a German Messerschmitt.
Yes, they were being bombed and machine gunned at Biggin Hill. Well, we were just over the road from Biggin Hill. Of course. And the plane came over, and both he and John were out in the pram, because it was a big Marmot pram, a big white pram. And they were machine gunning over, and I had to fly out and grab the two and get them in quickly. Perhaps I should have left them.
This would not be the first time he cheated death. 11 weeks after his second birthday, the woman whom God would prepare to be his wife was born in Uganda. Barbara McCartney was the daughter of missionaries, and although she would grow up in the UK, would not meet her man until 1970. A 21-year-old T.L. Osborne was in India, but would return disillusioned within 10 months, only to see a vision of Jesus. Michael's earliest memories of a Christian influence in his life are at the age of 4, when he clearly recalls his paternal step-grandmother teaching him to pray. By the age of 5, Michael's gift for debating was already highly developed. A barrister friend of his father's would take the little boy aside and engage him in combative discussion, only to emerge with predictions that he was destined either for Parliament, the law, or the pulpit. Michael was and remains blessed with an extraordinary memory. He could recite huge tracts of Longfellow's epic poem Hiawatha, and would, on occasion, be fetched from his bed in order to give sleepy evening renditions to houseguests. By the age of 6 or 7, the family had moved to Westgate, Kent, and many happy hours were spent playing in rock pools on the beach. On a day Michael would never forget, he was playing on a breakwater when a wave washed him into the sea. He couldn't swim, and as he sank beneath the waves for the second or third time, all he could see were the bubbles rising to the surface. Yet as he was drowning, all fear left him, and he suddenly knew that he belonged to God. Somehow his hand broke the surface again, and a woman sitting on the promenade happened to catch sight of it. She dived in fully clothed and managed to pull him to safety. In the meantime, God was developing a 25-year-old pastor by the name of Judson Cornwall at a small church in Kennewick, Washington. Michael's 8th year would be a pivotal one in his life. It was in that year, 1951, that T.L. Osborne's classic book, Healing the Sick, was published. Osborne would, indirectly at first, play an important and ongoing role in his life from the late 1960s onwards. It was also in that year that God caused a 38-year-old man, thousands of miles from Kent, to form the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International. The man God had chosen was a dairy farmer from Los Angeles by the name of Demas Shakarian. And 14 years later, he would play a role in Michael's life that no one could have predicted. It was no coincidence that Oral Roberts, then 33, preached the fellowship's inaugural message. On the 27th of July 1952, just 10 weeks after his 9th birthday, Michael lost his father, who had suffered a heart attack at just 39 years of age. He had been downed in the Channel during an aerial dogfight in approximately 1942, and his heart had clearly been weakened by this incident. T.L. Osborne had just held his great campaign in Venezuela and Costa Rica. Michael's family was left destitute. Anne was 4 months pregnant and the bank foreclosed on their home. But as Michael's father had been a Freemason, the Masons paid for Michael and his brother John to be educated at Masonic boarding schools. The boys were sent away, initially to the Royal Masonic School at Bushey, Hertfordshire, and the next several years would be difficult for this bewildered youngster. Nevertheless, it was here that Michael developed a love of sport that has never left him. He loved the school's superb sporting facilities and dreamed one day of being a professional sportsman. His hero at that time was Godfrey Evans, the outstanding England wicket-keeper. But he idolised many of cricket's great names throughout the 1950s. Men such as Dennis Compton, Len Hutton, Frank Typhoon Tyson and Jim Laker. Between the ages of 9 and 18, Michael's life consisted of boarding school tedium, punctuated only by occasional visits home and to Ireland during the holidays. Episodes of mischief and dreams of becoming a sporting hero. The school's Anglican services did not appeal to the young Michael, and during his early teens he turned against religion because of the hypocrisy he saw in the clergy. It was this cynicism, however, that would eventually lead him right into the arms of God. When Michael was 12, a 15-year-old Nicky Cruz was sent from Puerto Rico to New York to live with his brother, and for the next 3 years would be swallowed up by gang life in the Bronx. Just 8 weeks after Michael's 15th birthday, in July 1958, a newly saved Nicky Cruz started Bible school in California. God was preparing his servants. And God continued to work out his plan when, in 1960, during Michael's last year at school, Benson Idahosa was born again in Nigeria. The ministry that was birthed that day would not only usher in a majority Christian population in that Muslim country within 30 years, but would also lead to the opening of Penal College of Higher Education, and a bonding between Michael's ministry and those of Oral and Richard Roberts and T.L. Osborne 35 years later. 1,000 years is indeed but a day in God's economy. At the same time, a 35-year-old Judson Cornwall began to build a church in Eugene, Oregon, and T.L. Osborne, aged 37, returned to India for the first time in 14 years. Michael's first job at age 18 was in local government, where he studied for and passed the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors exams in estate management. He only pursued this career for 18 months, however, as he needed something far more challenging and exciting. Surely the police force would provide all the excitement and fulfillment a self-assured and thrill-seeking 20-year-old could want. Michael completed the training course at Hendon Police College and joined the Metropolitan Police Force stationed at West End Central in Savile Row, London. He worked first as a traffic officer and later with the CID, where his beat was Mayfair and Soho. Michael took up his own cause of ridding society of criminals and was so diligent that he arrested and saw convicted far more criminals in his 2.5 years as a policeman than many people who made it a lifetime career. As time went on, however, the job